Hi, my name's Kurt, and welcome to 7 Best Things, a positive look at pop culture. Today, we're counting down the 7 biggest hits of Paul McCartney as a solo artist. Let's go. Starting off our countdown, we have a 3-way tie for 7th place. Number 7, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey is the first single off of Paul's second album, Ran. It was co-written with his wife Linda, and it's an interesting collection of McCartney's melodies put together into one song. To help with the orchestral arrangement, Paul called an old friend, Beatles producer George Martin. Uncle Albert refers to Paul's real-life uncle, Albert Kendall. Admiral Halsey is an American naval admiral who fought in World War II. The two characters are connected by a catchy refrain, hands across the water, heads across the sky. Paul says this refers to an Anglo-American relationship, not the two countries, but Paul and Linda's marriage. Uncle Albert would become Paul's first number 1 hit, but definitely not his last. Number 7, Band on the Run. Band on the Run is the title track from Paul's most successful album. It was recorded in Nigeria shortly after guitarist Henry McCullough and drummer Denny Sewell had just quit Wings. Wings soldiered on as a trio, recording this track with Linda on keyboards, Denny Lane on guitar, and Paul playing bass, guitar, and drums. The words are based on a comment by George Harrison, who, during one long and particularly frustrating Apple meeting, said, "If we ever get out of here." Paul took that sentiment and transformed it into a brilliant song of escape and freedom. Like many of Paul's greatest songs, it's a number of melodies put together. It's a rock symphony in 3 movements. The first movement, the beginning, stuck inside these 4 walls. The second movement, George's quote, "If we ever get out of here." The third movement begins with that majestic orchestra crashing in, followed by some sweet-sounding acoustic guitars, and Paul singing, "The rain exploded with a mighty crash." Band on the Run has become one of Paul's signature songs. In America, it was the 3rd single off of the Band on the Run album, following Hell on Wheels and Jet. It was released in April of 1974, and the single joined the album Band on the Run at number 1 on the Billboard charts. Number 7, Listen to What the Man Said. Listen to What the Man Said was released as the first single off of Wings' follow-up to Band on the Run, Venus and Mars. It was a first-rate single, and immediately became another huge hit for Paul and Wings. The music is upbeat, super catchy, and incredibly well-produced. And it features, in my opinion, one of the best saxophone solos of the 70s, played by Tom Scott on soprano saxophone. The lyrics focus on Paul's favorite topic, love. Paul once again expresses the joys of being in love. Don't overthink love, just enjoy the wonder of it all. Listen to What the Man Said was released in May of 1975 and would be played on radios all across America that summer. It hit number 1 in the U.S. on July 19th, 1975. Next up at number 6 is a song that would hit number 1 despite some heavy-hitting competition. Of course, it had a little luck. Number 6, With a Little Luck. At the beginning of 1978, disco was king. Saturday Night Fever was the number 1 movie and album in America, and the Bee Gees completely ruled the charts. Songs written by the Brothers Gibb had been number 1 for 15 straight weeks on the Billboard charts. It seemed impossible for anyone to break their stranglehold on the number 1 spot. Impossible for anyone except Paul McCartney. In March of '78, Paul and Wings released With a Little Luck, a beautiful synthesizer-driven ballad written by Paul and the Virgin Islands. The lyrics once again reflected Paul's optimism when it came to love and relationships. It seemed to be a sequel to the Beatles' We Can Work It Out. We can make this all work out. All it takes is a little luck. Paul's success on the charts continued. With a Little Luck rose to number 1 on the charts, staying there for 2 weeks. At number 5 is a number 1 song that was supposed to be the B-side. Number 5, Coming Up. In April of 1980, Paul released his first solo album in 10 years, McCartney 2. Like McCartney, recorded in 1970, Paul played all the instruments on McCartney 2 himself. The first single from McCartney 2 was called Coming Up. It had a unique production by Paul in which he changed the sound of his voice through a vari-speed tape machine. It caught on immediately with the British public, rising all the way to number 2 on the charts. Columbia Records decided, without consulting Paul, that Americans would prefer the B-side, a live version of Coming Up, recorded by Wings in Glasgow in 1979. Columbia promoted the B-side, and the live version of Coming Up blanketed the American airwaves in 1980. That version, originally a B-side, went to number 1 and stayed there for 3 consecutive weeks. One important person who was a big fan of the original version of Paul's single was his friend and old bandmate, John Lennon. John loved the experimental nature of Paul's new single so much that he himself was inspired after hearing it to go back into the recording studio. That inspiration would become the album Double Fantasy, released by John and Yoko in November of that same year. After all those years, the Beatles were still inspiring one another. Number 4, My Love. Paul began Wings in 1971, and chart-wise, well, it had a difficult takeoff. Their first album, Wildlife, only reached number 10. Their first 2 singles, Give Ireland Back to the Irish and Mary Had a Little Lamb, didn't even make it into Billboard's top 20. Hi, 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 their third single, did better, making it to number 10. But people started to think that maybe McCartney was losing his touch when it came to crafting hit singles. They didn't need to worry. In 1973, Wings was rechristened Paul McCartney and Wings, and the first single released by the newly renamed band, My Love, became a worldwide smash. My Love is a beautiful McCartney love song dedicated to his wife Linda. It has a wonderful vocal performance by Paul, a beautiful orchestral arrangement by Richard Hewson, and a fantastic guitar solo by Wings guitarist Henry McCullough. Paul wrote a guitar solo for Henry, but Henry felt that the song needed something different. McCullough improvised a guitar solo, and Paul recognized it was brilliant, just what the record needed. My Love was embraced by the world as another classic McCartney love song. In America, it stayed at number 1 for 4 consecutive weeks, becoming Paul's 4th biggest hit on the Billboard charts. At number 3 in our countdown, Paul answers his critics with a single that would become the highest charting song of 1976. In 1976, Paul McCartney and Wings were on top of the rock and roll world. They were coming off 3 straight number 1 albums. Their tour, Wings Over the World, was the biggest tour of the year and was selling out everywhere. Despite Paul turning out hit after hit after hit, the critics accused McCartney that the only thing he could write was silly love songs. Paul wrote silly love songs as an answer to his critics, and it is anything but silly. It is a brilliantly complex pop song. More than just a song, it's more of a pop symphony. And like a symphony, it's made up of 4 separate movements. The first movement, the main verse in which Paul asks the question, some people want to fill the world with silly love songs. What's wrong with that? The second movement, that's a simple chorus of I love you. The third movement is the bridge. Love doesn't come in a minute. Sometimes it doesn't come at all. I only know that when I'm in it, it isn't silly at all. The fourth movement, which comes as a surprise, is how can I tell you about my loved one? Paul moves on to the fantastic finale in which he combines all of these different movements, ending with the question, some people want to fill the world with silly love songs. What's wrong with that? Paul answered his critics in a way that only McCartney could, brilliantly, and with even more mind-boggling success. Silly Love Songs remained on top of the charts for 5 consecutive weeks, and it was named as the number 1 single by Billboard for the entire year of 1976. Number 2, Say, Say, Say. In 1979, Michael Jackson covered a song from Paul's London Town album called Girlfriend, which became a minor hit in the UK. This led to McCartney and Jackson collaborating together in the early 1980s. Paul and Michael teamed up on the record The Girl Is Mine, which became the first single off Michael's hugely successful Thriller album. And in 1983, Paul returned the favor by featuring duets with Michael on 2 tracks off of his Pipes of Peace album. First was The Man, the other one was Say, 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 both of which were co-written with Jackson. Say, Say, Say was the first single from the album, and it became another huge hit for both McCartney and Jackson. The song was promoted by a video that was in heavy rotation on MTV. The song featured McCartney and Jackson as Mac and Jack, a pair of lovable con men with hearts of gold. Linda McCartney is also featured in the video. The video, along with the current wave of popularity Michael Jackson was enjoying, and the excellence of the song, made it a huge worldwide hit. It would become McCartney's second biggest hit on the Billboard charts, staying at number 1 for 6 weeks. At number 1, another all-star collaboration that would become the highest charting single of Paul's career. Number 1, Ebony and Ivory. Paul McCartney wrote Ebony and Ivory at his farm in Scotland, and he invited Stevie Wonder to record the song with him for his album, Tug of War. They recorded the song in Montserrat with the producer of the Tug of War album, George Martin. Paul and Stevie would play most of the instruments themselves, including Stevie on the drums. It was the first time that McCartney would record a duet with another major artist. The public loved the idea of the two superstars teaming up for an optimistic and upbeat song about racial harmony. The song became an international sensation, reaching number 1 in many countries. In the US, Ebony and Ivory would stay at the top of the charts for an amazing 7 weeks, and it became the biggest hit of Paul McCartney's solo career. Well, that's all I've got. What are your favorite Paul McCartney songs from his solo career? Please leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, feel free to like and share and subscribe, and check out the other videos that are on this channel. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.